us if we hit any technical difficulties, and if for some reason I lose connection, I'm nominating Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith to chair in my absence or until I can get back online. During the meeting, as we've done before, the recommendations for each item on the agenda will be shown on the screen, and the full reports everyone can find on the Council's website. So the normal technical stuff, please keep all your microphones on mute unless you're speaking. Can you turn your cameras off, again, unless you're speaking? And if you want to ask a question, can you please put Q in the chat? Or put your hand up, but sometimes if you put your hand up, all I can see is a hand, but I don't know who it is. So it's probably better if you could just put Q in the chat, and I'll come to you. And the way it'll work is that I will ask members of the leadership team what questions they have, and once the leadership has discussed the item on the agenda at length, I will then open it up to Councillor Rossi, who's the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, see if she has any comments. Councillor Mason, who's here as the leader of the Labour group, then other councillors, and then tonight I understand that we've got a couple of questions from the general public. So, and that's the other thing, and if you're asking questions, I think it would be very helpful if you could state who you are before you ask a question, if it's someone else in the room. But as for now, let's go through the introductions of the leadership team themselves. So, hello, I'm Elizabeth Campbell, and I'm the leader of the council. Anne? Actually, should I just call out your name and then you can say present? That might be easier, mightn't it? Anne.
Sorry, Elizabeth. Yes, I'm Councillor Anne Siren. I'm the lead member for communities, and I don't know why my computer is not working. Apologies.
Catherine.
Hi, I'm present. Hi, Catherine Folkes, the lead member for Economy, Employment and Innovation.
Jem.
Good evening, I'm Jem Kamali, lead member for Adult Social Care and Public Health.
Josh.
Thank you, Leader. I'm Councillor Josh Rendell, and I'm the lead member for Families and Children's Services.
Johnny.
Present and for planning, cycling and the environment.
Mary.
Hello, I'm present and I'm the lead member for finance and customer delivery.
And Emma.
Hello, I'm Emma Will. I'm the lead member for culture, leisure and community safety.
Great.
And Elizabeth, Kim Taylor-Smith is here too, deputy leader. Lead member for Grenfell Housing and Social Investment, but don't worry, I'm not feeling unloved.
I skipped your name. I apologise. Right, I'd like to invite you all now to join in our 72-second silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, are there any declarations of interest? And are there any apologies for absence? I skipped that one because actually I don't believe we have any. Are there no declarations of interest? And can I sign the minutes of the leadership team meeting held on the 11th of November as a true and accurate record?
Agreed.
Thank you. And now let us move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the Grenfell Recovery Resourcing Framework, which is for decision. Just as a matter of for background, I'd just like to set out that this paper sets out the resourcing framework for the next 3 years of the Council's Grenfell Recovery Programme. We've got 3 years of the programme remaining from April 2021, and what we want to do is to ensure that the remaining funding has the maximum impact on residents and for residents, and we're clear on that we are all collectively trying to achieve together, both now and in the longer term. And the focus of this report is really looking forward to the future, and it sets out our ambition to work collaboratively with our communities as equal partners to leave a lasting legacy from the Grenfell tragedy. So, you know, what we've heard so far, well, I suppose that the final version of the framework is, well, it has been and is informed by conversations with residents, colleagues, partners, and other key holders. It's incorporated comments and feedback from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which considered an early draft of the framework at its meeting on the 12th of November. And I think I should start by saying many thanks to residents, OSC members and other partners who've taken their time to share their thoughts and ideas with us, and we look forward to more of this. I think it's fair to say we've made significant changes to this paper since the OSC meeting, largely to reflect the feedback that we've heard. And in particular, we've also added significantly more detail in each of the key areas of the programme. And I would encourage everyone to look closely at this. And I suspect that all of you on the leadership team with areas will probably want to sort of explain exactly what you're suggesting that this framework looks like in your own areas. But before we do that, I'd like to take this opportunity to emphasise 3 key things that have come through strongly in our conversations to date. And I'm sure Anne will pick up on this later. The first is the absolute need to work collaboratively with our communities as an equal partner. And I think now that the report is clearer about how we'll do this in practice over the coming weeks and months, we know that we need to create as many opportunities for people to be involved as possible, you know, from big public forums to more targeted conversations. And the targeted conversations, so we hear quieter voices. And the second is the need that we really need to demonstrate the impact of every single initiative across the Grenfell Recovery Programme. And we know that success isn't driven just by the money we spend, but it's about whether people feel the impact. And we're committing to publishing annual impact reports of the recovery programme. And we look forward to more conversations with our communities about what actually goes into these. Part of this is going to be demonstrating that the initiatives are reaching residents from all backgrounds, regardless of ethnicity, faith, age, or socioeconomic background. And finally, I just want to say we've heard clearly that establishing a long-lasting Grenfell legacy is absolutely vitally important to our residents, our partners, and to our colleagues right across the council. And I'd just like to say it's really fantastic to see how many people are committed to working with us to create longer term change and to use this next stage of the recovery programme as a stepping stones to get there. So that's all I've got to say, but I will open it up to my leadership team. And actually, do you want to come in now?
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. The point I really wanted to concentrate on is the co-design of our response with those affected, which is really at the heart of this framework. And I just wanted to echo, I guess, what you said about working collaboratively with all our communities, and I want to add my thanks also to everyone who has engaged with all of our programs that are set out here and given feedback. I really do feel that we've spoken to many of our partners, and all of that input is reflected in this framework. When we talk about co-design, I think we look at the dedicated service, which is used by 97% of 700 eligible bereaved and survivors. And I think the reason why it works and why they're engaged with it is because they helped to build it. And I think this is a really big lesson from Grenfell. Like, we need to apply this to everything that we're doing in the council. When everybody is an equal partner, you get some much better solutions. And I think we've really had some good practice now of that we can use elsewhere. I think in terms of the support for the wider community, we've completed the first round of the project funds, and we're doing monthly sessions where groups who are awarded money for last year's programme come and present back to the community on what they've been doing with that funding. And I really do encourage everybody to attend these sessions. I mean, there's some great ideas brought to life, and really it gives you a very good flavour, I think, of how residents are coming up with their own ideas and actually putting them into practice. And it's a very uplifting session. So I really do encourage people to come to that. We've started speaking to people, to residents, about how we update and adjust that programme for this year. And we kicked off that work at the Grenfell Assembly, which we did online a couple of weeks ago. And we have several more engagement sessions planned over the coming weeks to build the programme for next year. And the same for our capacity building programme, which again, I think really does work to create that legacy. And residents can really choose what they need to access to become more resilient, to get more skills. And I think that's been working well. So I think really, I just wanted to say that we're really trying new ways of working. I mean, these are different ways of doing things, and they're certainly not perfect. So we really do welcome feedback and input. And, I really make it a priority of mine to apply all of that learning to other areas of the council. In fact, I think I probably, people are probably fed up of me talking about it. I mean, the other thing to say is that this is a framework, and it doesn't mean that it's set in stone. And I think what we've seen this year is a completely unexpected curveball with COVID, which we have to respond to and we have to adjust. And I think our response to the Grenfell tragedy, has been heavily impacted by what's happened this year. And I think this framework's really helpful in that it clearly sets out how we're going to provide the support that we're committed to providing to our communities. It's resident led, and things are up for discussion within all of the programmes that we've laid out here. And once again, I just wanted to thank everybody, officers and residents and our partners, for all the input into this paper. I mean, it's been many months of work, and I think has come out in a really good place.
Can I just echo that? I would like to thank the officers as well. I think it's a really good piece of work. And as Anne said, it's the beginning, isn't it? It's just that it's the beginning of the conversation, and we're going to have other reiterations. And it's really helpful to have a framework here on which we can, it's almost like a coat hanger on which we can all hang our clothes. Who else would like to speak to this? Josh.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Anne, and hello, everyone else on the call and at home this evening. So as you know, part of the Grenfell recovery strategy also includes, of course, children's futures, and of course, kids who are going to be across the intergenerational challenge. So we've tried to have a look at this report, and we've laid out what our vision is for that is commissioned children's services in schools, targeted support for children, etc. over the coming 3 years. As Anne mentioned, I'd like to say that the framework that we present tonight is just the start of the conversation. It's not the be all and end all. But what we've tried to do is we've tried to explore with our partners that we're currently working with. Those schools that we work with directly, and there are 18 schools in North Kensington that we deal with directly, of course, in regards to Grenfell recovery. We also look at the commission services that we also provide to children in the area, and that is, of course, LCAT and Kids on the Green. And we've also got other services as well, such as West London Zone, who really help children with their emotional support. So we've been obviously speaking with them the past few months, and of course with the community as well, too, just to really get their thoughts. And I think what we've got in the report and the recommendation is a really good set of next steps. Of course, can't get everything perfect, but I think what we've got on there is a baseline. But of course, what we're going to do over the course of the next few months, especially beginning in the new year, we're really going to be developing further, especially within the Family and Children's Services portfolio, consultation on what residents would like to see, what commission services would like to see, and of course what schools would like to see as well. And this is what we've laid out as an initial step forward. But again, this is very much the start of the conversation. But again, hopefully that we're on the right track. But of course, we welcome residents' views and other member views as well. Of course, very much committed to say that this is an intergenerational issue that we're going to help resolve, and this is what we're trying to just start that today. Thank you.
Catherine.
Hello, thank you. I wanted to talk about a discrete piece of work that comes in the Grenfell recovery, which is called Community Works. This is actually a piece of work that's separate to the help for employment that's already contained within the dedicated service. And I'm very pleased to see that there for the bereaved and survivors. This piece of work is actually to help all those affected from the Grenfell affected community, to help them get back into work and help them find the right skills to support them. So there is £250,000 that has been put aside into this pot. And continuing with the theme, this piece of work has been co-designed with the community, which has been a really exciting piece of work that I've been glad to be part of. We've had 4 sessions, which we had before COVID started, and it's a shame that COVID has held this up like it has so much in the Grenfell recovery. And out of those 4 sessions, 300 ideas were suggested to us by the community as to what might be helpful to them. And then we have narrowed those down a bit, had a further meeting, and with some, they've now come forward with just 8 ideas, which we're hoping to take forward. And in January, we're going to have a meeting to select the ones that we will actually dedicate the money towards. So I think it's an excellent piece of joint working, and it's been really exciting to see some of the imaginative ideas that the community have come up with as to how we can support them best. And as everyone else has said, this is very much still work in development, and input is welcome from anyone else who'd like to take part. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got Kim.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. Obviously, I'm going to be talking a little bit from the perspective of housing, and obviously housing response to Grenfell, is such an important role in terms of helping both the Grenfell survivors and the bereaved to move on. And despite the pressure put on us, we remain committed to do this at pace. And I think it's important just to remember that we still have 7 bereaved and survivors to rehouse and 15 households on the wider Lancaster West community, and we will continue to support them in terms of making that decision. As far as the inquiry, that's ongoing, and we obviously continue to learn lessons from the inquiry and bring forward new ways of working with things in the council, and particularly on obvious areas where the council failed in terms of housing services. And plans for the programme and the community involvement include, the bringing forward of the fire safety policy. We've adopted all of the Hackett inquiries, and it was important, that we did so to ensure, obviously, we have the highest standards of safety as far as our housing is concerned. And in terms of involvement, over the next few months, we're bringing forward a resident involvement strategy. We're already involving residents in the procurement decisions. We've got a very, very large capital programme that's really starting to get underway, and very much so next year. And the residents are involved in staffing appointments, and every step of the way as far as housing capital programme is concerned, they're making with us the medium-term decisions on how their estates are going to look and feel over the next 7 years. I think it's also worth talking about the involvement in looking at greening. I think that's a big area. We're doing a lot of work with alongside the Lancaster West, looking at experiments and cutting edge environmental enhancements, which something we could then roll out, and things that we can learn on and use elsewhere. But I think just to conclude, Anne talked a little bit about the application of learning, and I really do agree with this. It's at the heart of it that all learnings, are going to be the front and centre of our approach to delivering housing services as we move forward over the next period. Thank you.
Anyone else from the leadership team want to comment?
Oh, yes, please.
Who's that?
Jem, sorry.
Hi, Jem.
Thank you. Sorry, I think the hands aren't working there. I just wanted to say really around Together for Grenfell. I think what this really shows is that whilst sort of BAME is used as a catch-all terminology, I think actually what that's shown is that there are, within that acronym, there are Black, Asian, multi-ethnic is broken down. And what Together for Grenfell have shown is that actually you need to treat people culturally with their sensitivities in mind, and you have to really adapt to their own individual needs rather than just simply having a one-size-fits-all application. And I'm really sort of heartened to see the way that they've been able to engage over COVID, going to a digital model and continue the support that they're offering. Obviously, it's really important that it does continue going forwards, and I'm glad to see the way that they're planning to adapt into 2021. But I think it's a good time to sort of reflect on the way that you do need to adapt to all different ethnicities, cultures, and upbringings and things like that. So yes, just a small point from me there.
Thank you very much. I might just ask the officers if there's anything, Callum, whether, I know you've worked so hard on this paper, and Joe, whether there's anything that you want to highlight or add.
Thanks, Elizabeth. No, I think you've all covered it nicely, and with the introduction set out the parameters of the paper.
Yeah.
It really is the beginning, the start of a longer set of conversations as we hope to be able to work in partnership with many different parts of our communities, and giving them a greater ability to be able to shape a lot of the different work together on a more equal footing. So it's the beginning of hopefully a lot more forms of conversation. So thank you.
Yeah. And I think the point is on an equal footing, isn't it? And also the fact that, as it says in the paper, we want this to be a stepping stone to a lasting legacy. And in order to have a lasting legacy, it's got to really be throughout the council. And as a council, we have to have reflected the lessons learned from Grenfell throughout everything that we do. Marie-Therese, is there anything that you'd like to ask from the OSC's point of view? We hope that you appreciate, well, not appreciate, you hope that you'll note that we really have taken into account things that you've said to us.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, and to thank you. I'm very heartened by this report. I think it demonstrates that not just at the November OSC, but also the one in the summer, that the issues that were raised were listened to. I'm also very heartened by the emphasis on collaboration and, being equal partners and co-designing programs going forward. I have to say, I think we are going to go in the beginning of next year, we're going to go through a difficult period with the inquiry and with COVID not being quite under control. So I'd just like to say that I hope that residents understand that the leadership team and the officers, Callum and Joe, are trying very hard to make things better, and also to help the community heal. And that, going forward, I would ask you to continue giving that level of attention and care, which I'm sure you will, to Grenfell. Yeah. And hopefully we will come out, in the summer in a much better place, and that we will get through this. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat, is there anything you want to ask? I know Judith has a question. Nope. Judith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was wondering whether the letter from the Nottingdale Residents Advisory Board had actually reached all members of the leadership team, and whether it's going to be considered.
Yes.
The main point that the main point they're making is that the legacy fund appears to be directed solely to council housing tenants, and there are many tenants and other residents who live close, indeed closer in some instances, to the tower than a lot of Lancaster West, but they do seem to have been neglected and ignored so far.
Thank you, Judith. Yes, we were going to have a look at that letter. We've got two letters, actually, one that you referred to and one a question that Anne's got from one of her residents. So, Tom, can you put the letter up? Right. Judith, I don't know whether, as you're a signatory of the letter, do you want
to... On behalf of my RA.
On behalf of your RA, would you like to read it out? Or are you happy that, do you think people are happy that it's on the screen?
I'm reasonably happy that it's on the screen. I mean, I'll read it out if you want.
No, that's absolutely fine. So again, so do you want to give us a synopsis then? I think you just have, but if there's anything you want to add.
I just had. I mean, the key point being that money should not be going just to homes that the council owns, but to homes that other people own, not just the housing association sector, but also possibly even the private sector. And I would declare an interest as living in the private sector. I'm not sure that we actually want any money ourselves, but we know that other people living in the private sector do. And on the housing issue generally, I mean, by and large, it's been a very good response, but there are individual cases that don't fit neatly into all the policies that have been agreed that are really quite tragic. And actually, somebody needs to sort of take some kind of discretion with regard to those cases.
Okay. Kim, do you want to answer Judith's question and the main
I will do. And
letter?
Thank you, Judith, for what you've just said, and also thank you to the authors of the letter as well, because I mean, I think I really appreciate the feedback that's contained in this open letter, and I think it's important that we should be initially reminded that that the funding for the suggested legacy programme is funding that was spent on temporary accommodation costs for a very small group of households, which we now want to have a much broader impact on. And the Housing Legacy Fund represents the opportunity to work with a much wider group of residents in a new way. And we started by looking specifically at council estates in the local area, mindful that we do have a unique relationship with our tenants and the limited amounts of funds that we have available, because we've got 1 million over the next 3 years. However, clearly, as you have said, Judith, we clearly hear the sentiments expressed here. And of course, we know that others, and it's not just council tenants, were deeply affected by the fire. And this report sets out to the intended direction of travel. But as we have said clearly here, we want to work with residents on the next stage, and we want to continue discussions about what that right approach should be. And we recognise that there are different views about this, and we want to hear from as many people as possible to design and deliver, the fund. So I think the important thing now is that we do get officers to meet with the groups listed in the open letter and explore how we can continue to develop this important new initiative together, ensuring that we give residents the opportunity and the space to shape this work. So yes, I welcome the letter. Thank you.
Yes, it was done in a great hurry because people had only just read the paper. And of course, there are council houses within Nottingdale that don't have residents' associations, and particularly street houses and things like that you really need to spend a little more time on as well. But I mean, I welcome the direction that we're going in.
Thank
you. Anne, I think you also had a question from one of the residents about this paper.
I did. Sorry, just getting the question up. The question actually is not from one of my residents. It's from one of the community groups that we work with, which is the Henry Dickens Centre. And the question is, I'm sorry, I should have had it all ready.
Don't worry, it always happens. As soon as you're looking for something, it sort of disappears.
Hang on, I'll read it straight off my phone, actually. So yes, Lucy Knight from Henry Dickens. And her question is, what exactly is meant by a more universal emotional well-being and mental health offer in schools? And
I think Josh, you're probably the best one to.
Thank you.
Lucy Knight is actually LCAT rather than Henry Dickens. They work from the Henry Dickens Community Centre.
You're absolutely right, Judith. I apologise. LCAT.
Thank you, and thank you, Judith. Yes, absolutely right. I'd like to thank Lucy for her question. And after visiting Lucy and Susan at LCAT, I know what amazing work they do. But I think it's a really good question that Lucy raises. So the point about a future of emotional support and mental wellbeing services. So the aim of the paper, and as recommended in the paper, is that in the future schools will be able to commission their own wellbeing and emotional resources instead of the council basically saying what it is. And this is for a couple of reasons. One, the schools know their children much better than, of course, the council do. And secondly, it will be able to, these new commission services will be able to provide the best support for children available. Now, these may be, schools may opt to continue their commission services with LCAT, for example. And I know, as I said, the amazing work LCAT do through their art, psychotherapy, etc. There may be also other avenues that schools may wish to commission as well. As mentioned, we have other organisations such as West London Zone, which support young people's emotional well-being in schools. That's another example that schools could go to, or they could go through something else as well. So it's just the purpose of that line was to say that schools and other people who are commissioning services will be able to kind of get a broader resource in order to look after their children and obviously support them through the next few years and develop their emotional well-being, etc. But that's I'm sorry. That's basically where we are with that. I think Sarah Newman's on the line as well. Sarah, do you have any other comment that you may wish to add to that?
Thank you, Josh. Yes, just to add that Kensington and Chelsea were one of the first local authorities to roll out the mental health Trailblazer project, which means we've now got primary mental health support in most of our schools. And those that don't yet have it, we've just put in another bid for the fourth round of the project to get all of our schools funded for primary mental health support. And we're also working with schools and children and families to develop a trauma-informed whole school-based approach so that, again, all staff in schools are trained in supporting children's emotional well-being. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, sorry, could I just clarify a point? So in relation to LCAT specifically, we're going to be, launching a consultation early next year on the basis on the future of the funding. And as I mentioned in the report, this is just the very, very beginning as well on that particular process as well. So it's not like be all and end all that this is going to happen here. But Callum, I don't know if you want to add to that.
I would like to add to it.
Sure.
Hold on, Judith, because I've Callum and then Emma and then Judith.
Sure, thank you, Josh. And I guess just to go back to Lucy's original question around what we mean by the sort of essentially reaching more kids in schools. I think what we're really mindful of is over the last 3 years, we know that a number of children have been supported in local schools by organisations like LCAT and other grassroots organisations, and that support has been fantastic, needed, and we know that we want that to continue. I think when we're looking forwards, which is what this resourcing framework is all about, we're really mindful of the fact that, on the horizon, if we accept that it's a when rather than an if, we know that there are big moments, coming forwards, like the future of the tower and like the inquiry. And we also know that there are many schools, in the immediate footprint around the tower. So when we talk about trying to reach more children, we talk about it because of the fact that we are thinking and trying to plan for the potential increase in the amount of young people who may be impacted from a Grenfell perspective. And definitely things like Sarah's suggestions around trailblazers and others all need to be contributing to that same movement. I think we just want to make sure that we have prepared young people and the schools and places that they work to be as resilient as possible.
Thank you. Emma.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I just wanted to say how glad I am to hear that schools are we're going to let schools lead on so much of this work. I was doing Josh's role when the fire happened, and we were so lucky to have these amazing schools who literally wrapped their arms around these children and were able to provide them support. They knew what they worked with, and we can just row in behind them and say to the teachers, what do you need? What do you want? And I think that has been, since that terrible day, that has been the right approach. I was at a KAA governors meeting last night. We talked about what will happen when the tower eventually comes down. They do work closely with the families and with the children day in, day out. So I think that, I really welcome that. As Josh says, we've got some wonderful work going on. West London Zone, LCAT, Place to Be, all of that. But the fact that schools are really allowed to say what they see and need is really I think the right approach.
Anne, and did you want to add?
No, Elizabeth, I'm sorry,
You're an old hand. Okay, Judith, I believe you wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you. No, I wanted to commend the work of the schools because it has been fantastic, but also I don't want LCAT to be disadvantaged because of the work of the schools, because there is always a cohort of children who won't necessarily relate to their school, but they will relate to an outside organisation, and LCAT's work is absolutely fantastic.
And absolutely. I suppose we'd say these are the discussions that Josh will be having over the next few months. Okay, does anyone have any other comments? Otherwise, I think I'd like to say once again, I think it's a really good paper. It's a really good framework. It gives us a roadmap for the next year. And as we know, the next year will be difficult with the inquiry. And then there are other bumps in the road ahead with the future of the tower and the Memorial Commission. So I think it's very good that we do have this framework, and it is the beginning, and we will continue to have conversations with our partners in the community. Josh, did you?
I would just like to, yes, sorry, Elizabeth. I'd just like to say, of course, as well, that on the 25th of January, the Grenfell Assembly topic of discussion is children and young people. So it'd be good to get other views as well. So I just sort of thought I'd reiterate that.
Yeah.
Discuss this further.
And if anyone doesn't know, the inquiry itself has had to postpone its current hearings because of COVID.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so on your screen you'll find the what you're being asked to agree, which is the resourcing framework set out in the report, but specifically the high-level plans for each of the areas of the programme over the next 3 years, the plans to ensure ongoing community engagement in the programme, and arrangements for monitoring the impact of recovery initiatives and their contribution to establishing a long-term legacy for the tragedy, and finally the resource allocation for each area of the programme and the indicative funding profile for the next 3 years. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Yes. Great.
Agreed.
Thank you. Now, can we now turn to paper A5, which again is a recommendation to look at an emerging draft outcome framework for recovery. And I'd just like to say before we even start on this paper, I do think that whatever this paper says and the evidence and the statistics, etc., but they don't really give us the full picture of really the huge impact that COVID's had on people's lives, and losing people and enormous grief and loss of jobs, loss of earnings. We really can't underestimate it. And I would just like to also, as I start by really giving my condolences to those who have lost loved ones, I'd like to also thank all of our partners who've helped us in our response to COVID. And it's not just all our sort of official partners, NHS, etc., but it's all the voluntary sector who've played such a huge and enormous and important part. And indeed, all members of our community who've really rallied round. So we are committed to, again, as we've said in Grenfell, working with our communities to understand better what the impact of COVID is. And as we all know, we have a council plan, which we set up 2 years ago. And I think it really behoves us to actually look at our council plan in April, whatever, and really see whether there are things that need to be added in response to COVID, and that we need to go out and we need to ask our community what things that they feel are important, what areas that we should be also looking at, because we did say in our council plan, and we do mean it, that we are putting communities first. So if I can draw your attention to, I think, 5.6, the outcome and impact on the council plan, 5.10, the governance, and 6, the consultation and community engagement. And if I can take any questions or comments, please let me know. Anne.
Sorry, I'm not doing very well tonight. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I wanted to make some additional comments, if I may, particularly about how we're working with our residents and some of the specific supports that we are putting into the response and eventually the recovery. But I guess firstly, I did also want to offer my condolences to all of our residents who've lost loved ones. And it might be a global pandemic, but the loss is really personal when you lose somebody that you love. And I do know families in our community who have suffered that. So I really do want to offer my condolences to those families and friends who are grieving. And I think sometimes it can become a bit impersonal when you listen to the news and it's global, but it really is a very, it affects families, really, our residents very much. And COVID really has affected every single resident in our borough. And I would really observe that there were residents and families who were able to cope at month 3 who may not be able to do so now that we are 9 months in. And I think what I'm really sort of seeing through some of our support networks and our food banks is that we're seeing residents who really we've never seen before, who are plunged into hardship and distress. And I think this is really something that we have to bear in mind as we continue to respond and hopefully eventually move into recovery. And I just wanted to comment on some of the specific activities that we're undertaking to support our residents. The work on the hub all the way through this pandemic, I think, has been a good support to residents and offered in partnerships with our voluntary organisations. And they offer, the hub is able to provide a wide range of wraparound services and food support. We are supporting our food bank network with coordinations of supplies and supplies of fresh food. And at this point, I also wanted to just say that we really do rely on local knowledge from councillors to tell us if they're seeing things that we're not picking up. And I had a very helpful message from one of our colleagues today on a particular food bank that was not receiving what it was supposed to be receiving. So I would urge all councillors to be in touch with me to let me know what they're seeing on the ground. I also wanted to mention that we're part of the London Council's Food Poverty COVID Community Campaign, which is being led by Dame Louise Casey. And this initiative aims to ensure that nobody goes hungry this winter. In terms of speaking to our residents and working with them, we've completed the resident survey and we've had responses and feedback from over 600 residents. We're also specifically trying to target our hard to reach groups and residents through some of the organisations who particularly support our Black and ethnic minority communities, and really, again, co-design services and support with them. And again, this is a new way of working for us, and similar to how we worked with some of our communities to respond to the disaster at Grenfell. So we're engaging with the BME Health Forum, which includes groups such as Medea and Misawa. Some of the themes that have come out of this are digital exclusion. These groups really are affected by that, accessing GP appointments, mental health support, food security. So really thinking about the shame and stigma associated with accessing food banks, and really getting some good learnings on how we can sensitively manage that and provide to support to those groups. And again, just to sort of stress that I really do think that in addition to the robust social services we have at the council, we can only really address the challenges that we face with local residents, community groups, voluntary organisations, and all our partners. And, you know, just to sort of say that they really do know their members and clients, and we have to trust those groups that support some of our more deprived and vulnerable residents. I talked at the last council meeting about the example of SMART, who've co-designed their mental health response with their clients and with the CCG in partnership with this council. And I think it's really by working with our voluntary community sector partners, we can ensure that co-production that we know works. And it must be at the heart of our response as this pandemic continues. I think we've seen that it increases positive outcomes, makes them more effective. And I was really pleased that we definitely have included a large element of this in how we're supporting the Free School Meals campaign this Christmas and beyond. And our VCS and food networks will be a large part of this to make sure that healthy meals reach our children who are entitled to them. So thank you very much. And I look forward to any and all questions that that you may have.
Thank you. And I'd just like to say, I think you're absolutely right. It may be a global epidemic, but everyone's death is a terrible personal tragedy, and especially with COVID, when people haven't been able to go to funerals, etc. I mean, it's really been almost too hard to bear, I think. I'd just like to also pick up what you were saying about co-design and co-production, because again, that's the thread that weaves through from Grenfell and our learning, and that we're picking up with COVID and the work that you're doing with our fantastic voluntary sector and all the community. Jem.
Thank you. I just really want to re-emphasize the section on mental health. It does provide some figures, but I think they're already out of date. I think we all know that everybody has suffered, their mental health has suffered through this pandemic and the lockdowns, and it's really just beginning to see the impact into our communities. So I'm glad that we did have a motion the other day calling for a full review of mental health provision in the borough, because whilst what we had was sort of rated quite good, I think we do need to realise that the challenge ahead of us is going to be far greater than the one we've had in our past. So, you know, it's something that I think we really do need to commit a lot of resource and some time to, and I look forward to the review going ahead. But that's just a comment from me.
Thank you. Kim, you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. And again, I just wanted to add my own condolences to people who have lost loved ones because of COVID. You know, because clearly, I mean, this is a cruel reality of this pandemic, and it has a severe impact on our residents with earning the lowest wages and are most vulnerable. So I think it's something that we're particularly minded about regarding our own tenants, and I just wanted to outline a few things on that. We've committed to take a very flexible approach on any arrears. You know, we'll resist any enforcement action against our tenants. You know, a time where, you know, clearly, you know, there is an extreme hardship and it would be absolutely the wrong thing to do. We've geared up very much towards the risk of people approaching our homelessness strategy. You know, we have our recently approved homelessness reduction strategy where we're trying to stop this happening. And we're monitoring court activity in anticipation of when the no-fault evictions comes to an end. And at the moment, so we've had 327 homeless applications since July, which are currently obviously under review. Rough sleeping is actually quite constant at the moment. We have seen signs of transient rough sleeping coming in and going out of the borough, but we haven't actually seen a great increase in numbers of rough sleepers at the moment. But our outreach team are going out very regularly in order to monitor that. As far as the commercial portfolio is concerned, there's definite signs of our businesses that are suffering. You know, we do have a lot of people in the hospitality sector who are closed. And again, we're monitoring very closely on rent collections. And general fund tenants, we collected only 58% of Q1 rent and 55% of Q2 rents. And we're very much dealing this on a case-by-case basis, you know, to support our businesses through that. So, but, you know, I'm always a bit of an optimistic. So, I mean, I'm going to say that, you know, despite the challenges that we are facing, you know, I am optimistic that we can find the right balance to help our residents and keep our businesses afloat. And I just hope that with the vaccine just around the corner and maybe normality on the horizon, although it might be a distant horizon, that, you know, we can emerge with our businesses and residents intact, you know, ready for what's going to be a long recovery process. But certainly I commend the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary.
Yes, I just wanted to make two really brief points. And the first is that how glad I am that we have a role now for engaging with businesses, and Catherine in that role, because for me, I see the hard end of what COVID has done to our businesses in a hugely increased number of people coming forward for council tax relief. But I also know that we have never been as engaged as we have now with our businesses. And I hope that's something that we can really build on in the future, because I think it's been an enormous help. And just one small bit of news, which is that our hub, which has been such an important part of our response to this, and will be again, depending on what happens over the next few months, has just been nominated for a European award, which I think is a huge testament to the staff who've come out of all sorts of different roles to participate in that hub and respond to our residents. So I just think we ought to pass our congratulations on to them as well.
Yes, absolutely. And Catherine.
Thank you. I also would like to share the rest of the leadership team's condolences for all those who've really suffered from COVID, on top of already the tragedy of the Grenfell fire. It's been particularly tough, I think, for this borough. But as Mary just alluded to, this is an extraordinary time for businesses. I mean, something they've never been in this position for 300 years. And obviously the details aren't really contained in this paper, but just to know, sort of quick highlight is that unfortunately the three sectors in this borough that employ the most people, retail, hospitality, the cultural sector, they account for 23,000 jobs. That's almost 1 in 5 of every job that we have in this borough. And those are the sectors that have absolutely been hit the worst, and hit the worst actually in the whole country, along with Westminster. And mainly a lot of that is to do with the loss of tourism, which normally we'd expect 33 million tourists, and it's gone down to about 11. Well, that seems to me actually a rather optimistic statistic, but that's the one I seem to have in front of me. So we're looking at a very, very stark situation in front of us. And we're at the moment now where we're just having to respond to the situation that we're in. And how we're doing that is that we're making sure that we can direct our residents towards the support there is for skills and employment to help get people back into work, which are already existing. We currently have 10,000 people who are on universal credit, which is an enormous uptick. But what's so different to this pandemic is that these are people from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of professions. So from people who have been very high-flying, to all the way down. And as we've already mentioned before, unfortunately, of course, it is those in the lowest paid jobs who are going to be the hardest hit by this and who are going to find it hardest to get back into work. And so we must really concentrate on them. But on the other hand, we mustn't ignore the fact that there will be people who are now probably facing unemployment for the first time ever in their life. And they have probably got high rental payments to pay, and or mortgages and high overheads, and they suddenly find themselves on universal credit. So, this is a very, very stark situation that we're facing ahead of us, and I think we probably won't really get a sense of it until the spring. And it's great news we've got the vaccine, but in a way it's only when we've got the vaccine can we see what rubble has been left by the pandemic. But there are some positive things that are going on at the moment. For example, the council has become an independent assessor for the Kickstart programme, and we've managed to put together 79 opportunities for young people who are on universal credit, which is a really positive thing. And they're really great opportunities with people like architectural practices and retail companies. So that's a good thing. There are government schemes for apprenticeships and for traineeships. So our focus is making sure that everybody has as much information as they can to know what is available right now. And of course, we're managing the government grants that have come out, which I won't go into now, but there are grants for the tier 2, there are grants from when we were in lockdown, and now we're in tier 2 again, there are grants for businesses. So Mary's team are doing an incredibly good job at processing those and getting them out as quickly as we can to businesses. But looking forward, as where our next stage, the medium recovery after the immediate what we're doing now stage, I think it's just going to be really important that everyone's emphasised here that we listen to the community and we listen to every single individual, because I think there are going to be so many different circumstances that come up that we can't just look at statistics anymore. We've got to actually go out and talk to everyone to find out what their individual situation is. And only then can we start working around those programmes. And going back to what Mary just said about businesses, I do think it's fantastic that we've hugely increased our relationships with businesses. And it's one of the positives of COVID that we've set up all sorts of business forums and conversations that are going on, and that actually we've just employed a business engagement manager who's already doing a fantastic job at reaching out to businesses. And shortly we've got another new team member who's actually just focusing on apprenticeships and opportunities. So they'll be working as a sort of team, one going into the businesses to find the opportunities and the other one delivering them into our voluntary sector and schools. So there's a lot of work to do, a huge amount of work to do, and we really appreciate the community and the voluntary sector and all our partners in feeding in and helping us design what we need to do best for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd just like to draw your attention back to the paper, because as it says, 5.6, exactly what Catherine was saying, that for some time our response and recovery is going to run parallel. And the table in Appendix 1 is just the initial outcomes framework, and it sets out how the outcomes sort of link across to what's in the council plan, what's in the London recovery missions, and also in the Marmot review. And quite a lot of the actions it's talking about, we're going to have to deal not only in the borough, but really with our partners across London. And again, picking up on what everyone said, we'll be dealing with what's the evidence on the ground, but also, it's evidence plus engagement. So seeing what the figures say, but also engaging on a one-to-one basis with people. I think it's fair to say that the 5 priority themes in our council plan and the cross-cutting themes have stood the test of time, but we do now need to look to modify them. And that's why over the next few months, we're going to be with this framework reaching out, looking at the evidence, and really building on what we think recovery should be. So initially, we're going to be managing the recovery work internally with our recovery board and some task and finish groups. And it will be reported back to the leadership team quarterly. But as well as that, we're going to establish a strategic partnership board, which I'm going to chair, including representatives from key institutions and stakeholders across the council. And finally, of course, we've said that we'll put up to £8 million in a pot to support COVID-19 recovery. It's been included as part of our budget proposals next year. And of course, it won't be possible to fund absolutely everything that people want or suggest, but we feel that it's very good to have a pot there that we can look to. At the same time, we look to government funding, and at the same time, we look to external funding. For example, Anne gave a very good example with the community funding for food banks and things. Now, Amita, is there anything that I've missed or anything that you would like to add? And I should preface my remarks by saying thank you so much for all your incredibly hard work on this paper and for setting us up on the path to recovery and doing so well before you take a little bit of time off for maternity leave.
Thanks, Elizabeth. No, there's nothing to add. You've all covered that really well, except to say, just to echo what everyone said, really, the changes that we're seeing in the borough are quite unprecedented, and I think it's extremely important that we take the time across the council to make sure that we're finding out what those impacts are and speaking to residents beyond the statistics to make sure that whatever we put in place to help residents speaks to their aspirations and how they want to, go ahead in the future.
Thank you. Mary-Therese, anything from you?
Well, I mean, just to say that I agree with everyone. It's been a very difficult 9 months, and there are difficult times ahead. And the toll has been very great in terms of grief, but also financially. A lot of people have lost their jobs. So, yes, it's very important for us to listen to our residents and do what we can to help, and in particular to help our local businesses emerge from this crisis, which is unprecedented. And I guess we have to salvage what we can in terms of businesses and help the residents individually where we can. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? No? Okay, well, I think I'd like to speak for the whole leadership team when we say we wish you really well, Amita, over the next few months, and we look forward to seeing you again when you reappear. And hopefully you'll be reappearing in better times than there are at the moment. Can we all then please agree to the recommendation on the screen ahead of you? Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, now let's move on. Mary, the 2021 Revenue and Capital Monitoring Position, Quarter 2.
Yes. Well, I should start by saying I can't think that has ever been a lead member or cabinet member that's come to this meeting or its equivalent with a £33.8 million overspend at this time in the year. But as we've been observing all meeting, we live in very, very unusual times. And behind that figure, I think we have to acknowledge that we have had a considerable amount of support, in fact, more than I was expecting from government to help us through all of this. And that is going to be helping us to close the gap at this stage. And at the moment, we think our service overspend has been reduced to about 17.5 million through various grants and contingency that we had already, and in budget underspends. And the rest, the gap that will remain then is about 11.9 million. And of that, we're expecting that government will give us a further probably about 9.5 million in terms of income loss compensation. So we're still looking at an overspend of 2 million or so, but which will be met by reserves or further in-year savings. So the situation isn't nearly as bad as we might have expected it to be, and a lot of work has gone into by officers into keeping us on the course that leads to a much smaller overspend than we might expect. So my thanks go to them, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions on this? No, I think it was a very well written report and everything is very well set out. So nothing from the leadership team. Any questions from Mary-Therese, the OSC, or other councillors present?
No, just to say that the OSC budget working group will be looking at this in detail, and to thank Mary for coming and speaking to us and all the other officers. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so are we all happy to agree with what's on the slide ahead of you on this item A6? Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Mary, you're on again.
I am.
And let me just turn things over. Okay, and it's the 3-year medium-term financial strategy, December update.
I think we all feel we've seen this paper before, which we have in a different iteration, but it's very important that we carry on looking at it throughout the year, as it is lining us up for our budget. And at the moment, we're looking at a 21-22 budget with a 4.8 million gap still, but that's not enormous. And the government has announced extra money for local government since that time, and also a increased ability to raise money for adult social care. As you know, the whole budget and spending plan for next year is now out for consultation. So I think now we know that we have the potential to increase our council tax by 2% and potentially another 3% for adult social care. My advice to my colleagues would be to let's see what sort of response we get on our consultation and reserve our thoughts for what we're going to do next year to close that gap, whether it's including increasing council tax or finding other ways for another couple of months while we absorb or another month or so while we absorb all of that. I think the point that I want to emphasise again is that much of the help that we've received from government this year is 1 year only, or that helps us to close the gap next year is for 1 year only. And so we are still looking, despite even without fairer funding, at a longer term structural gap of some significance, about 27 million, that we need to tackle, and we all need to work together to do that. And I think that's all I've got to say in introduction.
Mike, is there anything that you wish to highlight?
No, I think that covers everything.
Okay, as Mary said, we've seen this paper in various iterations, but I would also like to say I agree with Mary. I know you mentioned the last paper, but I didn't pick it up. But it's as opposite on this one as the last one, as how much help that we have had from government, more than we perhaps thought we might have. So we're very grateful for that. Are there any questions on this paper? Kim, and then Jem.
Yeah, just a very quick one, Mary, on council tax increase, given that we've said that a commitment to be in the lowest quartile. What would be the maximum that we could increase our council tax by, but still remain in the lowest quartile?
I think if nobody else increased their council tax, we'd have to increase our council tax by 29% to come out of the lower quartile. So we've got quite a way to go.
Quite a headroom. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Jem.
Thank you, and forgive me, this might be a query of ignorance, so perhaps you can put me right.
They're the best kind, Jim.
The best one. Recently, the government obviously changed the interest rates on the borrowing that we're able to do from the Public Works Board. In our sort of longer term planning, do you budget on the current rate, or are we sort of pricing in an expected rise? I don't think we're ever going to see lower rates again, so it's like,
well, I think we said we're never going to see lower rates again about a year ago, didn't we, Mike? And we have. So when we borrow at a fixed rate for the full 20-year term. So when we talk about our borrowing costs in this year, it'll be whatever we borrow in this year to do over the next 20 years. So essentially, we factor in the current rate. Is that about right, Mike?
Yeah, we do, and so it did. That reduction in the PWLB rates does create a saving for us.
Can I just add something else, Elizabeth, that I ought to? When we're talking about council tax rises, I just wanted to remind colleagues that we still remain committed to the 100% council tax relief for those who are least able to afford council tax, and there will be more of them, I imagine, in the coming year. Unlike many other boroughs, we do commit to that full relief to those on lower incomes.
Okay. Any comments from Chair of the OSC?
Just to ask, really, the decision on council tax, when does that have to be taken? I would have thought early in the new year, or
yes, January. Is that right, Mike?
Well, not formally until the council budget meeting, but we'll
in
need to
go through OSCs and.
We'll need to make a decision sometime, probably towards the end of January, as Mary said, after the consultation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on the floor? No? Can we please agree then the items on the screen ahead of you? Do we agree?
Agree.
Item 1 and item 2? Yes?
Yes.
Agree. Good, thank you very much. Now I propose to change the agenda, and if Eileen is here, get her to come to talk to us about the report from the Adult Safeguarding Board, because then I would propose that we went into private session to talk about papers A8 and A9 before coming back in again. So if Eileen's here, can we do that now?
I am.
You are.
Chair.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. I'm just to present to you the safeguarding report for adults for 1920. I want to start. I'm not going to go through the whole report because I know everybody's got a copy of the report itself. I'm just going to pull out some sort of salient kind of facts and pieces of practice for you. I just want to start with some kind of data about Kensington and Chelsea and safeguarding referrals. On average, there are about 15 referrals per week, which is in line with the referral rate from the previous year. And of those, 75% relate to older people. And 3 out of 10 of those are people who lack capacity. So in our kind of safeguarding concerns across the borough, they are very much focused on the most vulnerable. 75% of our referrals come from statutory agencies, and that is what I would expect. But what I'm really pleased about is that over the year, we are really encouraging other agencies to make referrals. And so 25% of our referrals now are coming from other agencies, and that is to be welcomed. So that's housing associations, community associations, faith groups, sometimes banks, and a whole kind of a range of partners. And we want to build that because we believe that safeguarding is everybody's concern in the community and not just in the statutory agencies. What we find in the data is that when the concern is about a social care provider, so that's a care home or a domiciliary care provider, then the focus is usually around neglect or omission. So something that didn't get done that should have got done, or something about the quality of care. But when we look at the safeguarding concerns that come in each week, that aren't about social care providers, that are about other services or elsewhere within the kind of local community, then you see from the data there that there's a kind of range of different areas of abuse. And we start to have more referrals that are about financial abuse or psychological abuse or indeed physical abuse. So that's just a sort of snapshot of some of the data. We have 3 kind of sections on the report, and they reflect very much the kind of framework of the work that we do. The first is about creating a healthy and safe community, and this is very much our work programme from the board. And in 1920, and indeed it has continued, our main priority was actually engaging with local communities and building community involvement and spreading the word in relation to safeguarding. And a lot in this evening that I've been listening to has been the theme of co-production. And this was indeed the case in this work. And we worked with service users themselves, who are our advisory group in relation to safeguarding, and the local account group, and other representatives from community organisations in the borough, who talked to us about what some of their concerns were. And the local account group and the advisory group, on the basis of those concerns, actually made some videos. They co-produced some videos with the police, with the fire brigade, and with other officers that they then launched. And those were about concerns in the community, concerns about scams, concerns about fire safety, concerns about understanding what abuse actually is. And they launched those videos in November last year at National Safeguarding Week, and we had standing room only in Kensington Town Hall. It was absolutely packed. So a great deal of kind of enthusiastic response from the community and people wanting to be engaged more. And when we come to the final month of that year, of March of this year, so the final month of 1920, that work, I think, put us in a very good position with a very strong foundation of working with community organisations in the borough to be able to move into what then became this very difficult period that everybody has been talking about this evening. And I met with Michael Ash from the Kensington and Chelsea Volunteer Centre, and we worked with community representatives across the borough to be able to respond to all the new volunteers that came forward, and so many more kind of offers of help from community groups. But we had to make sure that that work was done safely, and so we actually developed a training programme giving DBS information to community groups and ensuring that volunteers were welcomed, but that was actually done in a very safe way. So I think that work has been very pertinent in terms of taking us forward. We then always have a section about making safeguarding personal. It's about ensuring that our service users are at the centre of what we do, and that if we have concerns, from them and about them, that we ensure they get the outcomes they're seeking from that work. And you will see that kind of explained in the report. And as part of that, making safeguarding personal, we're trying to really focus our attention on particular communities or particular groups that have kind of very special safeguarding concerns. And for the first time, we have presented ethnicity data in this report, and I'm very keen that we continue that, and that we need to kind of look at it in much more detail so that we begin to understand the different concerns and the different way that safeguarding impacts on different communities. And we have done some particular work at looking at where safeguarding needs to kind of focus, because where is it that abuse takes place? And there's a particular thing here about Kensington and Chelsea that I just wanted to draw out for you, because it is unusual in relation to other London boroughs. Normally, you get about a 50% kind of breakdown between concerns that take place in care homes and in other settings, and concerns that take place at home. But in Kensington, Chelsea, 7 out of 10 of referrals take place in people's homes. And that means that our focus has to be on working with that wider range of partners, on working with a wider range of community groups, and pushing forward the work that we've done on co-production and co-design, which has been very much, I know, a theme for the council, and it's very much embedded in the safeguarding practice. Our last section is our learning section. We are about learning from when things go wrong and making sure that that learning is embedded in all of our services and across all of the communities that the borough serves. There are some examples there. We haven't had a serious case review during 1920, but what we have exemplified there is the learning from the case in the previous year of how that's been embedded and taken forward. And in particular, there's some work on Think Family, which a number of staff across the borough have been engaged in working with us in some 7-minute learning about how to improve on working across adults and children's services so that families are at the centre of our thinking. And another example of some kind of multi-agency working. The report ends with the objectives that we have taken forward into this year. And I suppose what has been poignant about that is that we have included in the report a poem at the beginning from one of the service users, because it has been so much more difficult for them to engage with us and to carry on the kind of journey of this work because of being cut off during the COVID period. But they have certainly stayed with us and found new ways of working online, of coming to kind of Teams meetings, and finding different ways of working in their communities. So it's a kind of note, I think, for me to end on, to say that we have carrying the work on into this year, but having to find some new ways, some different kind of innovative ways to ensure that it's very much kind of embedded within the local communities that we're there to protect. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much for such a comprehensive report. And I'd like to say I really think it's a fantastic report because it's so well written and clearly laid. I've got it in front of me and clearly laid out and incredibly accessible, that there's not much jargon in it, and one can really easily understand exactly what the work you do and what your strategies are and what your priorities are. And I really like to commend it to the committee. I don't know if the leadership team. I don't know if anyone has any other comments. Chair.
Thank you, and thank you, Aileen, for what a wonderful report. I think the one bit that we clearly touched on lots, but one thing that really stood out for me was the drop in referrals during COVID. I think that's obviously to be expected, but these are clearly cases which have not gone away. They just have not been reported in the same way. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting was the graphics around the work being done in Westminster and how our community safety teams are looking at working together on that one, especially around sort of financial scams and frauds which are carried out in the community. I thought they were really interesting. And as the economic picture gets so much worse for us locally, I think people will be more open, let's say, for those get-rich-quick schemes, and they might not really realise what they're getting themselves into. So I think it's a really good extra piece of work that our teams can look at going forward as well. But thank you. It was a wonderful report. Thanks.
Yeah, really a fantastic report. Are there any? I think you silenced us all, Eileen. It's so comprehensive. Is there anything anyone wants to add or comment on? Otherwise, I'll open to the floor and see if Marie-Therese, anything from you?
No comment from me. Thank you.
Okay. Any other councillors present? Any comments from you? No? Well, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for presenting the report. And thank you really for an absolutely superb report itself. And can I now ask the leadership team to note the report and endorse the strategy and priorities which are informing current work? Agreed?
Endorsed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Okay, could we now go into private session in the other room to discuss papers A8 and A9, and then we will come back into public session when we have discussed them privately. Thank you very much. And Jem, I keep doing this. Kim, if there's by any reason I disappear, could you please chair the next meeting? Though I very much hope I won't. And I'll see you in a minute. While Tom's trying to do the slides, do you want to introduce this paper?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sure you've all read this. I will be brief, but I did want to start by just thanking Terry and Monica and the team for all the work they've done on this. It has been an enormous, enormous piece of work. And I also wanted to thank all the residents who took part in the consultation that preceded it, and in particular, Jenny Kettleworth from the Friends of Holland Park, who's been very, very involved in this, which is obviously a very good thing. Essentially, this is a contract for the next 10 years, starting in April 1st next year. And I think the key thing really to say is it's good news, because although there's a huge saving on the contract, we are getting a lot more goodies in it. Important things like London living wage, apprenticeships, social environmental benefits, in fact, more staff. And I know that Monica and or Terry will be happy to tell you about those in detail if you wanted, but it is all laid out in what is, I think, a very clear paper. And I think really finally, I'm just really pleased because I think we know the benefit of our parks has been enormous to our residents during this year. And I think it's, it's right and proper that we're going to be trying to focus on maintaining and improving the quality and the maintenance of them. So with that, over to your questions and to officers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo what Emma said, her thanks. It was a really clear report, and you can see it's just a huge amount of work, and great that we've been doing it in conjunction with sort of the Friends of Holland Park. And again, as Emma said, I mean, we've all really realised the value of our parks over the last year. I mean, they are just such gems, and so this Parks and Landscape Maintenance contract will really, really is extremely important to our residents. Are there any questions anyone wants to add? We've looked at the financials in Part B, but is there anything anyone wants to comment on this? Kim and then Catherine.
Okay, just a quick one. I noticed obviously in the report we're talking about, and I welcome the fact that we've included some social value aspects in terms of this contract, and I just wondered if you could outline a little bit about what that provision might be in terms of maybe discounted use at all or concessions for users of the park. Is there anything involved in that?
Thanks, Kim. I'm going to ask Terry and Monica to address that one in detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Kim. So yes, there's a range of social values and environmental values that have been added. So we've got London living wage added. There's a whole range of kind of local employment initiatives, including 2 apprenticeships a year for local residents, which is really fantastic. There's a lot around, there's a new post being funded via Ida Verde as well, called the Community and Training Manager, which will really encourage local residents to volunteer and local corporates as well to volunteer, really improving our open spaces and parks. So there's a huge range of benefits there, and there's a community benefit plan that's being produced on an annual basis, which will kind of set all that out. Regarding actual sports bookings and reductions on that, there is already in place some kind of concession rates for that, so they're going to be continued, but we can look at that moving forward as well as part of this kind of community benefit plan if we feel that is how we want to kind of deliver that service moving forward.
Sorry, I didn't write down. Is it Catherine? Did you want to comment?
Yes, thank you. Excellent paper, very clear. Kim's really just asked the same question I was about to ask. So just picking up on one point of that, and like Kim, I really welcome the social value aspect of this, and obviously the apprenticeships and the jobs. But it's good to see that you want to develop local supply chains, because as you already know, we do have the supply chain initiative already in action. In fact, it was very good news today in that 5 local architects are going to be put on a council framework for some of the building here. So, I hope they don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've already got a supply chain initiative going, so hopefully they can link into that and get local businesses working in our parks or building fences or whatever. That would be great. Thank you.
Anything else? Anything else in the leadership? Anne, did you have your hand up?
She did from the part B that we were going to ask in part 1, or maybe Anne feels it's been covered.
Anne, is there anything you'd like to ask?
No, thank you.
I think it was for the next
one.
Sorry,
Jill, sorry, I'm getting...
Yeah. I think it was for the next one.
Can I just say, Catherine, thank you for that. That's a really good reminder. And Kim, as to your point, there are concessionary rates, but I'm really happy once the new contract starts to, maybe it'd be a good moment to take a look at them all again and whether, they need refreshing. So I'm very happy to do that.
Great. Now, as there's nothing else from the leadership team, Marie-Therese, anything from the OSC on this?
No, nothing to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Nope. Okay, could we please agree the recommendations in paragraph 2 in the report, which are on the screen? Agreed? Thank you very much. And thank you once again for the team, because it's a great report. Right. And the final report this evening is item A9, which is support for Greenwich Leisure Limited to provide the borough's leisure provision. And as we know, leisure facilities have been hit very hard by COVID because they haven't been able to open. Emma.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I will be brief because I think the paper is pretty clear, and obviously we've been here before because this is the second payment we will be making to GLL. It is a loan. I do want to stress that. It's something obviously that we feel we need to do because we need to keep GLL going so that they can continue to serve our residents. They do also employ residents as well. But obviously it's important that we're part of a bigger group of people in London supporting them. And I think I will stop there. I know there are some questions.
We have just like to reassure those people who are watching, we have discussed this in part B of the financials. But Kim, was there something you wanted to raise on this? Or was it Anne? No hands up?
I think Anne was going to. We had partly the same question, so I'll bow to Anne.
Thank you, Kim. That's very kind of you. Well, the question was really about how other local authorities are responding to, I guess, similar requests. And we just wanted to make sure that we're not being played off and that there is a similar ask for every other authority. And then the second part of the question was, how are the other providers in the marketplace dealing with the same issues that they have? So, for example, Everyone Active, which provides the services at the Westway Sports Centre, I know have approached the Westway Trust with a similar ask. Are they all struggling? I mean, what's going to happen? Are they all going to be supported to the kind of extent that we're talking about here in our borough?
Let me have a first stab at that, and I think then I'll pass over to Terry. So when we made the first award to them back in the summer, that was a very key question for us, that we were not being the only borough being asked to support them. We're quite a small part of their pie, as you see in the report. You know, they also have centres in Barnet, Camden, Croydon. I won't list them all, but you get a flavour of it. And that was a very key question for me. My understanding is, and I'm sure Terry will confirm this, that others are once again being asked, and that is right and proper. But we do, and that is something that we have. We are having conversations with and keeping an eye on. I'll pass over to Terry to address really what's going on with. You mentioned the Westway. I think that, and he might just want to put an addendum on this as well. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Councillor. So, at the very beginning of COVID, the end of April, the local government association basically published some guidance advising how to support the leisure providers, and that basically encouraged kind of setting up some kind of clawback loan arrangement if possible, or at least providing some kind of financial assistance to assist the leisure sector through what has been a really, really tough time for them. In regards to kind of GLL in particular, there's about 15 contracts throughout London, and we're in regular contact with those contract managers or my equivalents across those contracts, and there has been an initial support been provided, and then again a number of those contracts have provided additional support or are in the process of doing that as well. So we've set up a steering group between all those contract managers so that we are consistent across the whole of London. Regarding the point around other leisure providers, some have been provided funding support by their councils, others haven't, and there is kind of some change of law issues that have been raised and potentially some court cases that have come out of this as well. So for GLL, there's a much more consistent approach, which is good. There is some good news, hopefully, on the horizon as well, and the central government have announced a £100 million grant scheme to fund or to support the leisure provision or contracts that local authorities have as well. And that's still to be, the details are still to be announced, but it looks likely that every local authority that basically has outsourced their leisure contract can actually apply for that, and that 100 million will be split between those local authorities. So as soon as we get more information for that, we will be applying for that.
Good. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on this report?
Yep.
Who's that?
It's Judith.
Judith, I was just going through the leadership team. Can I just ask Mary-Therese and then come to you? Is that all right?
Yep.
Mary-Therese, anything from the OSC?
Yeah, I just think if it's a loan, is there a time limit on it to be paid back by? And I know we're in an uncertain time, but I think you have to keep a close eye on this because it might just build and build and build. And then you have like a huge loan that they're never with lots of authorities that they're never going to be able to pay back.
Thank you. I think Emma is going to keep a very close eye on this because, as we said, this isn't the first time we've come back, but we hope with the coming of the vaccine and hopefully the flattening of COVID, but by the spring or the summer, we need these leisure facilities open because, we know that for people's mental health and for their physical health, they're very, very necessary. Judith, last word to you.
Yeah, thank you. There was mention that they employed local people, and I'm concerned about the staff who work in the cafe, who I think are mostly local people. And of course, the cafe remains closed, and I wondered whether they are actually on furlough or not. And sorry, I must declare an interest as a member and user.
Oh, that's a good interest to declare, I think, Judith. I'm going to be honest, I do not know the specifics of the employees in the cafe. I know one of the reasons that we put the extra funding on was to ensure that everyone furloughed got London living wage. You'll be pleased to hear about that. I wonder if Terry knows the answer specifically about those individuals.
Thank you, Councillor. Unfortunately, I don't. So I will pick that up with GLL and just find out particularly about those staff, Judith.
Yeah, thank you. Because I wanted to say that the cafe at the Kensington Leisure Centre is a huge community resource, and every time I go in there, it's packed out with people from the community of all generations at various different times of the day. And it would be tragic if the people who run that cafe, and they do it so well, should actually lose their jobs.
Okay. Thank you, Judith. Okay. If there aren't any other comments, I'd just like to thank Emma and thank Terry very much again for a very good report, and to ask the leadership team to agree the recommendations in paragraph 2 and which are on the screen in front of you.
Agreed.
Are they agreed?
Yes.
Agreed. Okay, and I don't believe there's any other business, so it just behoves me to say when it comes, I wish you a very happy Christmas, and I hope we all survive the winter, and I look forward to seeing you again in January. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Bye.